And so I'd like to introduce Senator Michael Bergstrom to everybody online. So Michael, it's your turn. Thank you so much for being with us, Senator.
Good morning, Harv. Good morning, everyone. Matter of fact, one thing that you didn't know that wasn't on that you were just talking about in my biography, not only do I have that many grandchildren, I also have a great-granddaughter that was born a few months ago. So, you know, we're continuing to add to the family. Had them all over here for barbecue yesterday. I wanted to go ahead and first start off and tell a little bit about what's going on in Oklahoma. We have a number of UAS stories that are going on. First of all, I think I'll talk about what's been happening with Choctaw Nation, which many of you will be familiar with. We have the Choctaw Nation's Integration Pilot Program. It's conducted very important testing and assisted with integration of drones into the National Airspace System, thanks to it having a 44,000-acre ranch and test site. Of the 10 entities that were selected across the country, it was the only tribal nation that was selected and the only Oklahoma entity selected for the program. And I know that although the IPP program is coming to a close, Choctaw Nation has plans to continue their testing and build out of infrastructure to make the ranch a hub for UAS and autonomous vehicle testing for many years to come. We also have OSU and OU. They have some amazing research and engineering programs that are doing testing of drone technology, and they're seeking out all of the many applications that drones can be used for. OSU has a graduate level engineering degree program that specializes in UAS. And of course, both of those entities have a UAS test sites that can be utilized. We also have Skydweller, a company that just recently came to Oklahoma. This is a drone manufacturer that actually needs to utilize our airport system, as it's rather large. It has 230-foot wingspans. These kind of drones, as you know, they're larger, faster, heavier. They're going to become more commonplace as technology grows and as the regulations allow. We also have Kratos here, and the drones that they're manufacturing is another great example of what we have, companies that have chosen to be in Oklahoma. And in addition to that, we have, the Advanced Mobility Pilot Program, which was passed and signed by the governor this past session. It was Oklahoma, we passed the measure creating the Oklahoma Advanced Mobility Pilot Program to further the state investment in innovative technologies. I was anticipating that we're going to be seeing more advanced mobility pilot programs from the federal government and federal government agencies. So I authored a bill that would identify local communities for pilot programs for the adoption of advanced mobility technologies and provide grants for the programs, generally expecting that we would have grant money to be matched by local communities and federal funding. That particular program was put under the authority of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. I guess what I was wanting to do was to position Oklahoma to be an emerging leader within these technological advances, and the pilot programs hopefully are going to be generating economic development. And so this proposal was to offer incentives and additional tools for Oklahoma communities to pursue these programs and encourage investment in this critical technology infrastructures. That particular bill allows for not just drone technology, but also for ground technology pilot programs. So that gives you a little bit of a background of things that have been going on in Oklahoma. Obviously, we're a state that's very interested in building upon what we have, and we're looking for more and more ways that we can be involved in this and be a part of this discussion and part of the business moving forward. So with that, I'm going to introduce our three panelists that will be on the program. The first one is Nicholas Flom. He is the Executive Director of North Dakota Department of Commerce, Northern Plains UAS Test Site Authority. Fred Judson is the Director of Ohio Department of Transportation, and Mark Reynolds, Vice President, Strategic Business, New York Empire State Development. Gentlemen, are you there?
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator.
I think what I'll do is I'll just jump into asking a few questions and let you guys, jump in, answer the questions, tell everybody what's going on in your states and the things that you're involved with. First question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the value proposition to your state for making investments in unmanned systems? And are you expecting economic returns, improved logistics, or is it, do you see this helping public safety? So what's the value that this brings to your states?
Thank you, Senator. So I'll start. Fred Judson from the Ohio UAS Center. So I'm the director, located under Drive Ohio, which is our autonomous ground vehicle on the air side. So I would say yes to all as far as return on investment. So if you look at small unmanned aircraft, providing safety increases and efficiency gains, there is a ton of that there that can be done just under the Department of Transportation. But we also act as a shared service for other state agencies that also provide those efficiencies to the other state agencies. One example of that, well, I'm going to just talk a little bit about our operations side. We've performed over 1,500 different flights so far this year. We're hoping to reach about 2,500 by the end of the year. And looking at those efficiencies from bridge inspections to traffic monitoring to anything DOT related, there is a ton of efficiencies. And when we talk about the COVID crisis, the drones offer that social distancing, unlike what we've had before. Getting into a shared service, an example would be the work that we do for our Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the location of buried ground wellheads. It used to be that somebody had to transverse all the property with a metal detector trying to find where these buried well caps were underground, where now we can use an unmanned aircraft with a magnetometer and do that at an orders of magnitude a lot safer and more efficiently than previously. But then if you switch over to the larger aircraft, you're looking at providing modes of transportation that weren't currently there. So you get into last mile package delivery, short, medium, long haul logistics, and then into the movement of people. And being under the Department of Transportation, we're focused on safe and efficient transportation of goods and people. When you scale small drone technology up into larger aircraft that are capable of doing those business functions, we're looking at not only improving our congestion on our current ground transportation system, but also adding to our resiliency of our transportation network and moving us into a true three-dimensional transportation system.
Okay, Mark?
Senator, thanks. That's a good question. So I'm Vice President of Strategic Business for Empire State Development, focused on semiconductors, microelectronics, and aerospace, and the unmanned air systems fall squarely within the aerospace sector, to which New York has a long history dating back to World War I with Grumman building airplanes on Long Island. Much of that has left and changed. We have some large aerospace industries in New York, primarily focused on defense products. when the FAA decided to have a program, a competition for test sites, we entered and won one of the, at the time there were 6, there's 7 now, FAA test sites. And our focus at that time, from a technological standpoint, was on sense and avoid technologies, so that we wanted to look, and we still do, at ways to make sure that drones are operated safely within the airspace from electrical, radar, communication aspect. Unlike many states where the drone systems, the efforts might be located within a DOT or a utility group within the state, ours is funded primarily through the Economic Development Agency, and so our focus is really on job growth and innovation. So we've been investing in small dollars in the first couple of years, but since 2015, fairly heavily. We've put about $85 million of state money into 6 primary programs, which to date have generated about 1,850 jobs, about $850 million in private sector investment in upstate New York across 36 companies. And they range in size from small startups with 1 or 2 people spinning out of some other company or from some university, all the way to attracting Saab North American headquarters to Syracuse. So our value proposition is in the economic churn to the state.
Okay,
Good.
take us home if that's all right. Kind of start with, complimenting a little bit of what Senator Bergstrom and Mark talked about from different programs that we're involved with from the state standpoint. One being the test site program that New York has been participating in. Part of that since its inception, and it's been led by our North Dakota Department of Commerce. So what does Commerce care about, integrating UAS into the airspace? I'll say, same focus that the FAA has, but they definitely are interested from the economic diversity component of everything. State of North Dakota, very agricultural heavy, second largest oil producing state in the country. So very commodity based revenue source. So they look at an investment like UAS or technology as one of those ways to diversify the economy. And we've been continuing to do that, of course, on the very front end from a research standpoint. With the test site program, has been able to really evolve from supporting our research universities that have been very heavily interested in UAS, but then also participating in the integration pilot program that Oklahoma is also, due to Choctaw Nation, participating in, which really goes into the commercialization side of things. So the fact that we have opportunities from an R&D all the way through commercialization is, where a lot of the investment has come into play. We also, the state of North Dakota has made some heavy investments over the last couple of years on continuing that growth pattern for the commercial market. Most recently with the $28 million investment for infrastructure to support a more advanced beyond visual line of sight operations across the state. And really that kind of hits a couple different focuses. The first I'll always say is the state of North Dakota. How can we benefit more greatly? As Fred mentioned, their Department of Transportation and how they're able to utilize drones more effectively. Look at this type of investment being very similar for the state of North Dakota, where we can help our state agencies to become more efficient. Also look at, how do we support our first responders and those types of use cases. And then the final component of it is the commercialization. How do we provide, different types of capabilities that you might not be able to find in different areas that can provide some new opportunities for people to come to North Dakota, not only for their testing, their research, but also for a platform to commercialize their technology.
Well, let's move on to the next question that I have. And I think Mark has answered this one to some degree, but what are the key investments that your states are making to support the programs, the value propositions that you have set forth?
Senator, I'll go first on that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, when we first got the test site designation, our focus was really on working capital. We needed to provide some money for staffing, hire the right experts, make sure there was a home and a hangar and some space for them to work. And we were able to put that together in concert with County of Oneida, which happened to own a closed Air Force base, which was racked at 20 some years prior, called Griffiths. And hence the name of the test site is the Griffiths test site. Then in 2015, Central New York was awarded a grant from the state, a 5-year program of grants from the state based on a investment plan that they had created with $30 million focused in a UTM Corridor, which today is operating over an 8-mile area for beyond visual line of sight testing. It is growing to a 50-mile corridor from the city of Rome to the city of Syracuse. We added to that a $25 million venture program, which is a business plan competition, which is worldwide. Every year we give $1 million to the winning company and $500,000 to each of 4 other companies to set up shop in Syracuse for a minimum of 2 years. It's in the 4th year, so we have 20 companies that have set up shop, and they're doing amazing technology, working with each other and with some of the larger companies. We added to that a jobs fund, which is more of a traditional economic development tool that many states have. This one is focused on drone companies. If they come in and promise a certain number of jobs, we'll provide them grant money for those jobs. So that's a $5 million program. And we just kicked off earlier this year the construction of an indoor test site called the Sky Dome at Griffiths, and that's a $9 million investment by the state of New York. And then there's the local investment that leverages that.
All right. Fred, what about your investments?
Yeah, so unlike New York, we went for, back in 2013, we went for the FAA test site designation. We were not awarded of that, but we continued to support unmanned aircraft within the state. And one of the examples of a great program that we have is our Sky Vision asset that is at our Springfield Beckley International Airport. That sits there and helps us with the deconfliction of the national airspace system between manned and unmanned. That was a partnership with our Air Force Research Labs. Both the state of Ohio and Air Force Research Labs contributed $2.5 million to the development of this system. So that system operates to do beyond line of sight, true beyond line of sight in 200 square miles at the Springfield Beckley Airport. In that, we are able to test aircraft or unmanned aircraft of all sizes. So we're not just limited to smalls. We can do any group and do that with in beyond line of sight. So that's a great example. And currently we are meeting all of all the different groups are being tested out there, and it's exciting to be a part of that. So that's a great example. The other big project that we've got several, but I'm just going to focus on 2. We do also have a UTM corridor that is a 35-mile stretch. Now we don't have beyond line of sight designation for that yet, but we're trying to work towards that with the FAA. That is under the Partnerships for Safety program, one of our subcontractors. And I do have to qualify. Our OSU is Ohio State University. I know, and then our OU is Ohio University. So it always gets confusing when we work with you guys over at Oklahoma.
Okay, Nicholas.
Sure, I'll talk about a couple of the different investments. So a unique part of North Dakota is our state legislators only get together every 2 years on a biennium basis. So kind of highlight, our latest biennium that we're in the middle of right now. The state of North Dakota made a $33 million investment over this past biennium, kind of broken into three different segments. And this is by no means everything that we're making investments in, but kind of talked about the $28 million. That was a lion's share of that funding for enabling beyond vision line of sight, advanced capabilities across the state. Another $2 million for the test site program, just on some administrative, and, kind of keeping the doors open to support the test site initiative through the FAA's test site program. And the third part is an infrastructure investment for the Grand Sky UAS Business Park. I know that later today there'll be additional discussion with a good friend Tom Sawyer, who will be able to give a little bit more highlights of what's going on with that program. But there's additional, so those are all kind of have, of course, economic benefit side of things, but, additional types of investments that the state has made over the years. We've had a great program called Research North Dakota, which was a partnership between the North Dakota Department of Commerce and our research universities, where private industry could come in on a cost share basis, be able to do research on a matching funds type of basis. We also have a program called LIFT, which provides investment funding for companies that are looking at getting into the different types of technology space, and this has been able to fund new up and coming OEMs who are looking to start developing and manufacturing UAS and some of their supporting technologies as well. So kind of a vast array of different types of investments, with an emphasis on, jobs creation and, having companies, say plant a flag in North Dakota to continue their operations.
Let's say, I do have to say that OSU and OU for me is Oklahoma State University and Oklahoma University of Oklahoma. But also one other thing that we have in Oklahoma that I didn't mention that I probably should have, and Oklahoma, obviously, with all of the tribal nations that we have all kinds of opportunities for partnerships and ways that they can be involved. The Osage Nation has a Droneport north of the city of Tulsa. So we have a number of those tribal entities that are very much trying to be involved in this area as well. Next question I have for you guys is, you've kind of touched on this a little bit, and I think Mark has touched on this already more than the other two. But what's been your return on investment? You've had obviously probably some return on investment in jobs and that, but how do you look at your return on investment so far, and what are you looking at for the long term? Nick, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I give the return on investment, I think, comes in a couple different ways of identifying it. One of the main parts I can point back to is, one of the major investments that the state has made in the UAS Business Park, Grand Sky, which is put in place through an enhanced use lease out at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. Direct representation there of two major corporations coming to the state of North Dakota, Northrop Grumman and General Atomics, and both of them supporting operations that are complementary, but sometimes standalone from their customer on the other side of the Air Force Base, being the U.S. Air Force. Those alone have created, high-paying jobs. I kind of look at mid-level, not necessarily all entry-level jobs. They're professional grade jobs of college-educated, which has been a huge, type of investment. And on top of that, not only the jobs portion, but also the private investment of these companies making investments into the permanent infrastructure, their buildings, hangars to support their operations. Throughout the state, we're also seeing, other types of, return on investment from our state agencies who are starting to use UAS as a tool now. The efficiencies that we're able to see from our Quick example, our Department of Transportation, everything from road inspections to the survey work that they're doing. Those are direct benefits right back to the state of North Dakota on the efficiencies of these agencies being able to do their work, not only in a cost saving standpoint, but oftentimes in a time savings and then a safety component as well, and a much safer type of operation. So, kind of we're looking at it from, not only from the jobs that are being created, the investments that companies are making, but also the efficiency of our state government.
Okay, Fred?
Yeah, I'll go the same as Nick as far as where we're seeing efficiencies. It's hard to quantify, when you get into specific use cases or return on investment. So if you look at again, we dive into the smalls. When we perform a survey like what the example I gave earlier for return on investment for finding buried well caps, for example, we can do in a day what used to be a week would take somebody to transverse the ground. So yeah, there's a lot of return on investment just in that use case. But if you look at you can dive into like bridge inspections. If you can augment some of the snooper, and a snooper is a truck with a big arm that goes underneath the bridge to help with inspection. If you can augment some of those services and use unmanned aircraft, not only are you providing, or not only are you gaining, saving money by doing so, you're also gaining a lot in safety, where you don't have to close down a lane on top of the bridge, and not just impacting the existing traffic, but reducing the potential of accidents. So there's a safety and return on investment there. But we go into return on investment into the larger aircraft. Again, we get into last mile package delivery, any type of logistic operations for the movement of people. Being that is so early, it is difficult. So that we as a state know that the electrification of aviation, that is the third revolution in aviation that's happening right now. And we are pre-positioning ourselves to support that industry. Now, when we start talking about return on investments, as of today, actually, we are starting our economic impact analysis. That'll give me hard numbers, is to try to quantify what all these new advanced air mobility technologies are going to do for the state of Ohio. But if we follow what NASA and the FAA have as far as projections of vertical landing takeoff aircraft, and then you actually get into electrification of vertical landing takeoff aircraft, and then what that is going to do for like last mile package delivery, short, medium haul, long haul logistics, and movement of people, we're going to see a lot of changes in our transportation system that'll offer efficiencies and services unlike we've ever seen before in history.
Okay, Mark, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, like Fred just said, measuring the economic value to the community or the state from use cases is difficult. You might pick up some hotel spend and some restaurant spend if the company's from out of state or whatever, and they might only be in town for a few days. So we tend to use our traditional economic development metrics for the return on investment, which is measuring state and local tax revenue from direct and induced jobs that are created on the ground. So those of us in economic development, I think, all recognize it's easier to grow an existing company than to try to attract a new one, although we all try to attract new companies all the time to our area. But we do focus on some of the existing technologies in aerospace extant in the state, which is radar and communication and electromagnetic stuff. It's not only supported by companies like Lockheed Martin and BAE and Moog, but also the Air Force Research Lab has its command control computers information technology, C4ISR directorate located across the street from the test site, and they're heavily involved in helping us with the deconflicting technologies on microelectronics and RF and GPS and that kind of stuff. So I think the it's a long haul kind of analysis. Our focus is on creating permanent jobs, and it might not be building drones in New York, but all of the software and comms technology that goes in and around it is probably where our sweet spot is.
What, moving on, what is each of your states, or what are each of your states doing in the area of controlled sites for operations? And just, if you would, define what your state's scopes are for what you see as a controlled site for operations. Mark, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So we developed the Griffiths test site as a controlled site of operations in 2012, and it's an operational general aviation airport. Because it's a closed SAC base, it's really big. It has a 12,000-foot runways, 300 feet wide, and lots of land area. So working with the local, it was a county-owned airport, and so working with the local airport management team, we were able to develop space that was dedicated to mostly smalls, but some large drone tests. And then with the state investments that started in 2015, we were able to build the corridor with all of the radar and sensing technology necessary to monitor beyond visual line of sight testing. And so that space is right now 8 miles long from the current airport, which is the closed military base I talked about, to the previous airport, which is 6 miles away, and it's a mile on either side, with plans to grow that all the way to Syracuse, which is 50 miles. And then the newest twist to that is the Sky Dome, which is a 55,000 square foot Air Force hangar built in 1941, which the Air Force stopped using 20 years ago, and we're populating that with 5G and GPS and microelectronic hardware to be able to test radiation resistance and radiation deconflicting and simulating cyber attacks and all that kind of stuff in an indoor space.
Okay, Nick, what do you say?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll kind of go on two different strategies that we've had. One, of course, on the fixed location. Use Grand Sky as an example. That the type of investment that we've needed, not only from the land, the working with the Air Force on not only through the enhanced use lease, but joint use agreement, so that the tenants can have access to the airport runway. But another investment of being able to leverage the existing radar that was there, so that aircraft that are using the facility are routinely now flying without a chase airplane, larger UAS by Northrop Grumman and General Atomics, flying anywhere from the surface all the way up into positive controlled airspace, Class A, without a chase airplane in the vicinity of that Grand Sky Business Park. So that's been a great component for kind of a fixed location, being able to do these types of routine operations. There is limitation though on the commercial opportunities that can be there, because it is a fixed location. And really early on from the test site program, we recognize that having a fixed boundary type of area actually is limiting to the types of operations. Very early on, we looked at agriculture as one of those breakout markets, and if from an ag standpoint, what most of the agronomists are looking to research is it's plant disease, it's the quality of what the crop is looking like, and that's all very dependent on the type of crop that's planted. So if we had a fixed location and there wasn't that type of crop planted, they wouldn't be able to do that type of research. So we made ourselves available that we could go out and mobily execute, and we've done a really good job of that over the years in order to be able to support kind of mobile operations. And now we're kind of getting into getting a better idea of, where are these operations occurring, especially for the commercial market. And this is where the statewide network comes into play, where we can actually start installing some permanent infrastructure that can support multiple use cases. And that's really our ultimate strategy, is that you have, one set of infrastructure that can support, everyone from, the state, our state DOT to the oil and gas industry, and then also to your first responders. And, starting to find, be able to spread out, I'll call it those fixed locations, but with an emphasis of, not just trying to support a single use case. So we've definitely made an evolution from, what does it look like from a very solid type of use case all the way down to, what does it look like for, expanding across the state.
Okay, and Fred, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, again, agree wholeheartedly with Nick on that state's visions, ours too. We do have active sites that we control, that we do testing, and then we do have that, the fixed sites work well for research and development, but to enable an industry, we really need to look at a statewide goal. So if we look at our SkyVision asset, as I mentioned earlier, manages at 200 square miles at Springfield-Beckley Airport. It's located just 30 miles from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is also home to Air Force Research Labs, much like New York. And that's a controlled facility where we can do unmanned aircraft of all sizes, the R&D work there. So that's a great example of an asset that's operated by the Department of Transportation, and then in partnership with Air Force Research Labs to do some really great testing of aircraft of all sizes. The UTM corridor that we have, one interesting development in that is we're actually locating one of the radars on top of our Department of Transportation headquarters in Columbus to support the last mile package delivery operations in the city of Columbus. And so, as the Department of Transportation, much like Nick said, we're looking at the enabling infrastructure. We know that a lot of the operations that are proposed don't quite fall into the existing frameworks that are still developing. So we look at what infrastructure do we need as a state? If the regulatory framework is not there, what infrastructure do we need to satisfy an exemption or a waiver to meet the needs of industry currently? And then have eyes to the future of what those regulatory changes will be. But then have that infrastructure already there and operating within the state to support that industry when the regulatory framework falls in place. That being said, as a long-term objective, the state of Ohio sees the need for corridors connecting our 3 Cs, so our largest metropolitan areas in Ohio, but then also, and that would be the I-71 corridor, but then also the I-75 corridor, that would be Cincinnati, Dayton, and Toledo. So we're focusing on those corridors to see, how do we satisfy, or how do we enable not just commerce within the state, but interstate commerce, and then look towards like Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Indiana, West Virginia. What does that mean between the states once we start crossing state borders when we enable the new aviation technologies? So those are some of the examples, and then some of our future vision.
Well, Fred, I'm going to have you go ahead and start on this next question that I have for you. We've touched upon the last mile deliveries. I've heard several mentions of that, short, medium, long haul. And I think you just made reference to what I'm going to ask about. What about legal issues? Not just in regards to where we're going in the future, but what kind of legal issues have you had in the state, and legislation or legislative fixes that have been necessary, or legislative fixes that you anticipate?
That's a big question. So the regulatory, Ohio has been very friendly as far as the new technologies are concerned, whether it's small or large. A lot of time that we spend is trying to educate everybody who wants to deliver a package what is the existing regulatory framework. Commercialization under Part 107 for package delivery isn't the avenue. It's I know there's a lot of want for that, but when you start getting into the other regulations, when you start wanting to do a package delivery type operation on the FAA, so fall under Part 135 at that point. And when you start digging into the requirements of Part 135, the aircraft technology used needs an airworthiness certificate from the FAA, and it is very difficult to go down that road and receive that type of certificate. So a lot of what we do is education, and then we again will point back to like the Sky Vision asset that provides an opportunity for those companies that are trying to do that type thing, like get the FAA type certification. We offer unique services there to try to help them receive that, so they can either do last mile package delivery, larger logistic operations, or even the movement of people. And it is a unique asset that sits there and tries to support all those different R&D that's required, not just in the technology itself, but to prove to the FAA that they're able to operate safely.
Okay, Nick, your thoughts in this area?
Yeah, we've obviously that's an issue, especially going back 10 years ago as it started becoming a little bit more of an emerging market. I think we took some really proactive steps early on to educate ourselves and the community around that. Our University of North Dakota, just as an example, heavy on the research component of UAS, they set up a UAS research compliance committee, almost right out of the gate. And this had, community members also be involved, so that when you're looking at the research component of things, having a seat at the table from the community, so that we could help mitigate any type of their initial concerns. And we're able to get great feedback through surveys as well of what everything looks like. The other, as we've started to progress, this last legislative session, they put in a requirement for me and some of my colleagues to brief an interim committee on kind of the status of the UAS industry, and then kind of most importantly, where should our state legislators, where should they get involved, where should they stay out of the way, and what are some of the challenges that we may face in the future, and how can we mitigate those early on. I think we've seen success with that so far. I think having the conversation early has helped, and I think that what you're going to hear is the main component of all of this is through education. It's through the outreach portion of things. We're getting through the UAS integration pilot program. That was a way for state, local, and tribal governments to work together at the various stages of what should policy look like at those various levels of government. And we've actively been through surveys and through outreach, we've been able to get a pretty good pulse of what people's feelings are, and had a platform to educate at the state or local types of levels.
All right, Mark.
Nick mentioned that North Dakota is a biennial or bicameral governance system. New York's a little bit different. Governance in New York is a full-time gig for a lot of people, and at all levels, from the state down to the city, county, village, and town level. There's lots of layers. It's really surprised me by the lack of obstructive legislation that's been developed within the state of New York around UAVs. There are some towns and villages and counties that have developed some local laws limiting or at least affecting the use of unmanned, but it's not a big thing yet at the state. That may be because our focus at the test center is really on command control and communication, as opposed to package delivery or some other kind of more socially intrusive stuff. But we are aware of it, and Syracuse University has developed the Autonomous Systems Public Policy Institute for that purpose, and so they gather experts in the industry to try to develop best practices, and I think that the state and local governments in New York are some of the first customers of that. So from a federal policy standpoint, the New Air group that runs our test site spends a large component of its time writing waivers and negotiating with the FAA so that the private sector can do the tests that it needs to do. That is a real, pain in the butt, and I think all of us are hopeful that that process can be streamlined in the future.
Mark, I'm going to start with you on this next point. And I think that you've answered this to a large degree, but as far as where your funding comes from, it seems like that you said it's coming from the state of New York for most of the funding, but I'm curious about what sources of funding each of you has for your programs, and also what state incentives have been beneficial to UAS development.
So in the beginning, our funding was really relatively small dollars of working capital, and that came directly out of the state to the local governments. And the county government actually dug pretty deeply once they won the test site to provide reduced cost hangar space. They were very lenient in terms of lease pricing and access fees to the runway and to the airport in general. But since then, most of our money has been in capital dollars, which New York has to bond for on an annual basis, and because the demand or the needs at the time was for radar and hard assets to build out the ranges. And then a unique component was the Genius New York funding, which is the business plan competition. And that came out of a legislative line item that was put in the state budget several years ago, focused on a specific geographic region around Syracuse, New York. And we were able to modify the use of that to focus particularly on startup investments in drone technology.
All right, Fred.
Yeah, thanks. So my operating budget is currently funded by our Department of Transportation, knowing the efficiencies of what the small unmanned aircraft could do, but then, scaling that up and what the future of transportation will look like. So under my current operating budget, that was started back in 2013, we have been able to get other programs going beyond what I actually have in my budget. So, it really comes down to, different programs and how you can justify these new aircraft operations under those programs. So a lot of our funding, or a lot of our projects have been funded by our Office of Research, which also gets into federal highways. So federal highways has partially fund some of our efforts that we have. We look toward our federal partners like Air Force Research Labs, our Sky Vision asset, and then also was able to get additional contributions from our governor's office. And then just recently with our UTM project, that was our Office of Research under the Department of Transportation, also federal highway money, we were able to get additional money from our economic development arm. Our Jobs Ohio was able to help us out with that. And then, what I didn't talk about is the Fly Ohio effort that bridges all the stakeholders in Ohio that have the same wants to promote this kind of technology within the state. A great example of that is our Ohio Federal Research Network that has their own research programs geared towards the same goals that we have. And we were able to leverage some of their efforts for like our UTM project. So there's a contingency management platform that's being developed that monitors system health while we do operations. And we were able to, not only meet what we needed as far as the contingency management platform, but also satisfy the goals of the Ohio Federal Research Network in their desire to research the same. So we were able to leverage each other's work and for a common good. And I think that's it's a win-win. When it's a win-win, it's a great thing. So, so leverage whatever resources you have out there and be a good bagger, I think is probably.
Nick, your funding sources.
Sure. So, majority of this so far has come through our, I'll say from an umbrella component, our Department of Commerce. But really that's broken down into, different types of programs that Commerce has managed. Right out of the gate, I look at, just the fact of them funding the test site program. It's a state agency. It's a, state supported. So I look at, us as ourselves being, someone that can, support, both the industry coming in, from a kind of the nucleus of the ecosystem within the state, and then also a resource that can be leveraged by our different state agencies. Another program that I kind of mentioned earlier, this Research North Dakota, was that was really a way to attract, probably companies from outside of the state to start conducting some of their, take some of their IRAD dollars, bring it to the state of North Dakota, work with their research universities, and, be able to do, their research at, 50 cents on the dollar. And really with the caveat that this is something that could benefit the state of North Dakota from a long-term economic type of benefit. We also have, funding programs, Innovate ND, which is that's a good way for cost sharing and matching of funds for startup entities that are looking to get into this type of technology space. Seeing great success from both our third-party vendors who are looking to be supporting from a services standpoint to different levels of the technology that's being developed. Again, incentivization program. It's a great program, I think, both from the state to attract these companies. There's resources that the people who are part of the program are able to leverage, everything from their own type of fundraising to, how do you start a business and how do you get the success? We have multiple entrepreneurial centers across the state that, really lead these companies through, through the process. Those have been greatly beneficial on the front end. And then, some funding through, we have a state-owned bank, state of North Dakota does, that is able to offer some, very low, interest, if not, forgivable type of grant programs for people entering, a little bit, later stages of, the process to, again, it incentivizes kind of both ends. It incentivizes a company that's already in North Dakota to maybe pivot a little bit and, find an opportunity in this space, or can, a company that is going to be brand new and, has something that they can offer, or, even better, bringing somebody from, another state that now that the state of North Dakota has made this investment, they see us as a continued opportunity, to plant their flag in the ground in North Dakota and, set up shop and, hire employees to be operating out of North Dakota.
Mark, let me start with you on this next one. What would you describe as some important lessons that y'all have learned over the years in regards to UAS?
I think, if in the context of the last question, trying to secure funds for this, I think setting expectations with elected leadership is very important. The airline industry and the aerospace industry is a highly subsidized industry from decades ago. Every airport in North America gets federal funding. They don't pay for themselves. Regardless of the outrageous prices you spend on a cup of coffee in an airport, there's still losses. And I think when, at least from my perspective, when when we're looking for economic development money, not used to dealing with loss leading kind of agencies. Maybe if it were in the Department of Transportation, like in Ohio, it's an easier sell that those are annual budget line items. But in economic development, you try to put your money in once and get it out over a relatively short period of time through tax revenue. And these things, like the test sites that we're running, they don't pay for themselves, and you can't charge what it costs to run it very easily. It's the industry is research is very expensive in and of itself, and so companies are trying to spend their money on technology, not on rent or fees. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson that we've had to learn, is that it's not a traditional economic development project. The horizon's very long, and it's going to have to be fed for many, many years.
Nick, what about you?
I think, lesson learned, just to kind of, pull on the thread a little bit more what Mark's talking about I think the expectations for our legislators is really important. Look at some of these programs that we've initiated that they took 3 years from the time that we started it to the time that it was finally approved. And this was something that could happen in less than 6 months. And in hindsight, look back, it's like, would I have ever gone through that entire process if it was going to take me 3 years? And the answer probably would have been no. And I'm really glad that we did, though, on the flip side. But what we've been able to find is, there's champions. There's champions within our state legislators who are who see the value in this, and they can champion it, amongst their colleagues. It is there's technicalities that's tied to this industry. There's things that unless you're involved in it on a daily basis, there's terms that you'll never come across. The fact that I would say that we have a majority of our state legislators know what beyond visual line of sight is pretty incredible. That's a term that nobody needs to know unless you're in this space. And the fact that they can say BVLOS or beyond visual line of sight or know what the value of that is, that's pretty incredible. And I think that's taken, a lot of the time. That's finding champions within the state legislators who can see the value. You bring them out so they can touch and feel it. I think seeing something in action goes a really long ways, as opposed to just talking about it. Because anytime that you're just a line item and, in a budget, and maybe they see a little bit of press around it, but they don't actually see it in action, I think all of those things are, things I would highly encourage is, find your champion and spread the message as wide as you possibly can.
All right, Fred.
Yeah, I'll echo that. It is really setting expectations in education. Being said, I consistently being told that my presentations are too technical, nobody understands it. So always try to make it that one pager. How do you spell BV? How do you explain BV loss in less than a page of it? Say it's long range drone missions, but yeah, so it is. It is setting those expectations, and communication really is the key. And I agree again with Nick. It is finding those champions that want to make it a priority or take the time to understand what those terms are, and then realize what what kind of gains that we'll see as a state as a whole if operations were expanded beyond just one controlled site to statewide operations.
Okay, so let me start with you, Fred, because we have about 3 minutes left.
Sure.
Have each of you just give a closing statement. You can say, just something that you think is extremely important that we need to know before we get out of here, and you get the first minute.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just continue with what I was saying. Don't be afraid to ask. For whatever program that you're going for, and sometimes you don't take the first no or the second no. Just keep going, and then when it comes down to looking for funding, or just continue to evolve And if it's important, that, everybody will jump on board if they see that value, and not just don't be afraid to try.
All right. Mark, what are your closing thoughts?
As a state representative, I guess I would say that the bigger of a network you can build within the state bureaucracy for advocacy of the use of unmanned, whether it's the utilities inspection people or the environmental conservation people looking for algal blooms, or it's public safety, fire, police. Those are very important spokespeople to support your mission. And if you got those leaders within government supporting the use of unmanned, then doing things a little bit more out of the box are easier to sell to, I think, to the elected officials that you need to sell to.
All right. And Nick, you get to finish up for the panel.
I don't think that this is necessarily if you build it, they will come type of industry. I think that one of the big successes is having the collaboration, having the partners that you can be working this through. Those partners, those industry partners can help out from the FAA approval standpoint. Those partners can help, tell the message to our state legislators of the value of this. Those partners can go into the communities and, show the value with the different parts of the job creation. So I think, finding those partners and, going through the journey with them, is a great opportunity for everyone.
All right. Thank you, Nick. We've got about 20 seconds. I'm just going to say, excuse me, I appreciate spending time with all of you. And I'm hoping that this was useful to people. And I certainly enjoyed being with you today.